Hi, I'm Christine Harrison, and I am welcoming you to Art Accelerated's 2021 Writers Reading Series. I want to thank the Oregon Cultural Trust for their generous grant that makes this virtual offerings possible. Today, Ciel Downing is going to read, and Ciel was raised on the shores and in the pines of the Pacific Northwest. Her writing is steeped in the hope that the coastal waters brew. She's been in numerous journals featuring her poetry and prose, was in last year's Word and Image Project, and was honored with the Academy of American Poets Prize in 1998. Her current works are embedded in memoir and short stories. Welcome, Ciel.
Thank you. I have four pieces. This first one is called In the Palm of the Woods. I lived day to day, not month to month, nor season to season when I was a little girl. So an August day, still holding the longer breaths of daylight, seemed to go on for a glorious forever. By then, my skin was dark brown and my feet were so calloused from living barefoot, I could run across rocks, sticks, or the challenges of any other grade or substance. I knew every trail, backwood, or section of beach with secret embankments for as far as a child could wander in the hours of a day. And August days at my Aunt Pearl's cabin by the beach were steeped in the unbridled joys I found where the mountain forests come down to meet with the Pacific. It was in the summer months that I fit in, and my 8-year-old self knew unchecked exultation. I loved school, but there were all kinds of rules that I did not understand, and worse yet, social rules that I not only not know the source for, I wasn't sure about the need for. I was often hungry, not just for food, but for a show of affection, the hope that I belonged somewhere. I craved being held, able to talk with someone, though I had no idea what I'd say. But here in the Neoconic forest, my rough little feet would be met by the tender mosses, and I could interact with the deer, the raccoons, and squirrels that I fed, and get kisses from the collected dew that gently dropped from the leaves above. Here I was loved and nurtured literally, fed by the land, of huckleberries and blackberries, their juices still sweet and warm with sun. I would hoist my 45 pounds with the agility of a cat and be cradled in the crook of aging hemlocks, where I could get a view that usually only warblers and sparrows got to see. My young heart swelled with this powerful feeling I got to share with the birds. Dawns were pale with the marine mist that often burned off even when the sky only hinted of sun. The petrichor fragrance of the woodland floor would rise up in the final heat of the day, wafting years of expended pine needles and alder leaves upward, where it hung lilting in the air like a musical note. August is the month when the shallows of the bay water whirled warm with the sunlight of day, and stars launched themselves across the black skies at night. Excuse me, the nights are true nights, no ambient glare, no city or street lamps. So when it finally does arrive, it is whole in its blackness, complete and unhindered. I had no concern about being out of step. This world welcomed me without reservation. Evenings began to draw their curtains sooner with the passing days. I stayed out in the trees till close to nightfall, savoring the gloaming. I loved the quiet, loved sighting the first star to show itself. I loved and felt loved. In the dusk, I could feel at once hidden and at home in the trees. My brown legs and bare feet dangling from a limb. From my perch, I could hear the ocean in the distance and imagine the confluence of all the rivers rushing to be with it. I listened to the last of the bird trills, sometimes catching an owl hoot. With the absence of sun, I could smell the wood smoke start up through our chimney and wind its way through the lazy air. I knew I would be called in soon. I hung on to the thread of August nights until they were as thin as spider webs. And if I could not fully grasp the idea then, I felt the cadence of its pulse here in the loving arms of the forest, and knew one day it would once again be alive in me to save my life and lift me gently back to the places where I fit. And this next piece is called Unfurled, and it's derived from being a veteran. I went into the Army voluntarily, but as best could be called a reluctant patriot. I believed neither in war or violence, but I did believe in the Constitution, in honest debate, in honorable dissent, and in my own father's service. These, however, were ideals, thoughts, and the foundations for beliefs, not raw realities, not experiences. On the plane to South Korea, I met Sandy, another young woman who would end up being stationed with me. From our very first bus ride, we bonded over the unlikely friendship forger of being held at gunpoint. Armed security nationals stopped the bus and boarded. One training his gun on us while the other demanded ID. Our arrival was no less auspicious as Sandy contracted hookworms and I got pneumonia. There were no septic systems or sewage systems, so opportunistic infections ran rampant. So did the rats. We all had hysterical rat stories to tell over quinine beers. Stories that were only funny after the fact. Such was the soul-sucking, mind-bending, gratitude-inducing vortex of Korea. On sunny days, the air was thick with the odor of fermenting cabbage soaking in hot sauce in the village. The base was surrounded by concertina wire with rice fields just on the other side. In the barracks, you always knew when people in nearby rooms went to bed by the loud thump on the wall. You see, if you hit the wall hard, the cockroaches would fall off onto your blanket and you could snap the blanket to get them off. That way they don't fall on your face while you're sleeping. Ultimately, though, our collective hearts would be moved with admiration and broken with sympathy for the people, as we time and again witnessed raw life with little room for merciful moments. Yet they always rose up, always found a path. The old that were too exhausted or infirm to work the rice fields begged in the streets. I heard it said 1,000 times, you can't save them all. But when you see an old woman with only a few teeth left, her face creased like the lines in a leather suitcase, those eyes pleading for a pittance of humanity, when you see that, well, when I saw that, it was a given that I would be going home penniless. Maybe I didn't save a one of them, but it saved parts of me. Our village had lots of prostitutes. That's what they'd be called in the US anyway. It wasn't the same though. These were women younger than me with no options other than the rice fields. That means being bent over for 10 hours a day, stuffing the rice bag while waiting in a sea of water down human waste in sweltering sun. So for as many years as their looks would allow, some women gave in to supply and demand. Some of them became my friends, sharing outlandish belly laughs and endless dancing. I learned the depth of their stories, sometimes the depth of their souls. They taught me the power that words like prostitute and expendable had with gut-wrenching clarity. We'd been warned of North Korean spies who supposedly lived in the mountains above the rice paddies. Since an abundance of the warnings about being in country ended with the military caution of, or your dicks will fall off, Sandy and I dismissed the spy theory as paranoia culled from one too many novels of intrigue. I recall whispering to her, if there's really spies, I'm James Bond. Months later, I'd found a wonderful flat rock in a very private spot on the mountain, and I jumped at the chance for sunbathing. Not 10 minutes in, I heard a twig snap, and my annoyance welled up at the ill mannered GIs that I assumed were taking a shot at peeping. I was about to yell for them to show themselves while I hastily started to dress when I heard the sound of lock and load. At once, unmistakable and sobering. Dressing was overrated and self preservation kicked in. I ran like a madwoman through the mountain brush, making trails where I lost them and tumbled down to the rice paddies, racing across their dikes, half dressed, hoping not to fall in. This little episode resulted in my nickname being Bond for the remainder of the summer. I relay all this to you to help you better understand the remainder of this story. Sandy and I arrived on the same day, and so we left on the same day on an all-military flight. Initially, we couldn't talk enough, running over each other's sentences and words in flurries of excitement and overtalk. 16 hours of flying later, our words nearly spent, we grew quiet. The year we had just lived playing over in our heads. Once away from it, the impact of what we'd seen started to sink in, and fatigue doesn't allow for the usual mental filtering that keeps the bad parts at bay. The stewardess announced for everyone to open their window shades and look outside, saying, "That, ladies and gentlemen, is the Pacific Ocean. And if you look toward the nose of the plane, that's the California coastline." Without looking away from the window, Sandy grabbed my hand. Neither of us felt like we could dare breathe. Nearly 13 months away, and we were so close now we could see it. No one spoke. My throat was too constricted. It was a long 20 minutes before our descent began. Finally, over the loudspeaker system, we heard, "Your attention, please." The passengers went hushed and goosebumps popped all over my arms. "We are about to land in Oakland. For those of you who've been here, welcome to the United States. For those of you who've been away for so long, welcome home." The speaker audibly clicked off, and there was a split second of silence before the whole plane erupted into cheers. People clapping and high-fiving, hugging each other, whoops of exultation, flasks being passed around, and overt weeping. The tears flowed as freely as the smiles were broad. It became a slow motion moment for me. The rock is celebrating the gratitude, this ongoing moment of what it's like to return to one's homeland. A plane full of people cheering and holding one another. We were coming home. We were coming home. Semantics have never worked very well to convey it, but to this day, when I hear "welcome home," I hear that stewardess on the speaker system, and I can feel the cheers flow like they were oxygen running through my veins. That indelible imprint never feels like it was 1983, rather just 1 second ago. And this is switching gears a bit to the fire camp, which will become clear shortly. Rounding the final corner of the gravel road, the vista is stunning. 13 cabins tucked away in a bowl of firs, pines, and cedars, set deep in the woods of a forest. This place is a fire camp where inmates learn how to fight forest fires. The inmates often call it Prisonland. The gravity of consequence weighs heavily here, but it doesn't fall evenly. The majority of the men are poor, and they have addictions. It's in this prison that I was most exposed to hope and grace, and ultimately, redemption. I started ungodly hours, arriving in the dusk of pre-dawn, in the dark of pre-dawn. It's my favorite time of day, before throngs of inmates demand a moment of counseling time, before the tensions rise, before I am reminded that men are locked away for the safety of others. A fleeting thought whisked through my brain, leaving a little vapor trail that whispers, "Let today be peaceful." The gravel crunches with frost underfoot as I leave my truck on the way to my cabin office. In the eastern sky, the palest of January pinks glows with the promise of light against the silhouette of majestic trees stretching out for as far as the eye can see. A doe and her fawn saunter out of the lower yard, approaching me for apples. The fawn has lost her spots to better blend from predators, but I've no treats for them today. A harsh life, I think. And they turn away nonplussed. They don't care. They're used to having nothing and they'll go elsewhere to find what they need. I can see the dock of the chow hall. At the base of the dock is a rays of raccoons that swarm around the food that the inmates are tossing them. One inmate catches my eye and loses his smile. I nod and smile, but I say nothing. It's a violation to feed the wildlife, one I will not address. It's dark and it's cold. The officers are inside tending to their own warmth. For this one moment, the man can interact with the world in a way that does not define them as prisoners. I check in to receive my radio and attach my keys to my belt, leaving the admin building for my cabin. A sea of blue knit caps are gathered in the dark, all around the entrance to my office. Miss Story, I have to see you today. May I have a moment of your time? Calls out Mr. Jared. Always so polite. He's one of the rare ones who actually ask. Doesn't wait for an answer, but hey, at least he asks. Before I can say a word, the avalanche of requests fills the air, punctuated by my name. My arrival has been discovered, and I waver between feeling flattered or beleaguered. I hold my hands up in surrender and assure them I will post a sign-up sheet before I even turn my computer on. I am one counselor for 200 men, leaving all of us dissatisfied. I catch a glimpse of Mr. Remington and motion for him to come over as I walk. Did your grandma opt for the surgery? I ask in a low tone. Yes, ma'am, but with her diabetes, it might could kill her, he says through pursed lips and a furrowed brow. Okay, how about we set aside 5 minutes before dinner chow tonight and you can call her from my office. I bet it would do her a world of good to hear your voice, I offer. I'd like that a lot, he whispers hoarsely. The lights from the chow hall make his filling eyes glisten. It's not a safe look in this environment. I punch his shoulder, saying curtly, good man, we're on then, and quietly pass him a Kleenex, which he abruptly takes. Approaching the stairs to my cabin, a group of men sit blocking my path. Make a hole, I direct them. Begrudgingly, they move closer to one another so that I can get by. I part the men's shoulders to wade through and lean down to whisper into Mr. Three Arrows' ear, either you have a deformed breast or that's a pack of smokes in your shirt pocket. Needs to be gone by pat down. I stand up and take the final stare. Mr. Three Arrows gives me a cocky half smile, saying smugly, it's a deformity, ma'am. I hold up both palms like a scale, saying just as smugly, here in paradise or the state pen, your call. I can get away with speaking more bluntly than the officers. Being old, female, and of a slight frame works to my advantage. There's very little status to be gained from taking me down. I see him mouth the words bitch before his head turns, but it's too small a battle to take on, and instead I enter my office. It's hub day, the day when new prisoners arrive to replace the ones that have either been sent to the pen or released. Only two are coming in, and neither's rap sheet or reputation causes fear to rise in me. I call in the first one for intake over the loudspeaker, and he arrives in his orange jumpsuit that the newbies wear. Hi, Mr. Donald. I'm Imogene Story, and I'll be your counselor while you serve here at the fire camp. I usually continue to inquire more about them, but his posture is tense, his hands are balled up, and his expression is that of dead intent. I contemplate discreetly pushing the red button on my radio, but I don't want to give in too easily. He holds his palms up slowly. You can stop your spiel. I ain't staying, he states flatly. Well, I don't know where that's worked before, Mr. Donald, but it won't fly here, I say evenly. Yet I can feel my pulse picking up in my chest and neck. I add, the Department of Corrections makes those decisions, not you, not me. So, in an instant that I had not seen coming, he is out of the chair and trying to push over my large wooden desk. I try to hit the red button, but his momentum is quick and my hands jerk between my radio and trying to block the desk from pinning me to the wall. You two do make those decisions, bitch, he roars. Back off now, I order with all the conviction I can muster, hoping my trembling does not show. The door bursts open and two officers wrestle Mr. Donald to the floor, screaming, stay down, while he yells, I won't stay in a camp with these people. I hear the cuffs clicking into place and note my hands with white knuckles are still hanging onto the desk. I simultaneously inhale and swallow to regain my composure. I am visibly shaking and cursing myself for not being able to control it. Officer Yamada stays behind as Mr. Donald is escorted out. Yamada smiles broadly and quips, how's your morning so far, counselor? We both cascade into laughter, and I'm really grateful for his levity. He's one of two officers that are not white, and being native, I see and appreciate what he goes through. I know he always has my six. There is no rebound time in a prison, though, and I have more men to see. Please tell me my next guy is a DUII, I laugh. DUII inmates are usually far more afraid of prison than most, and they're often a lot easier to deal with. No such luck, darling, Yamada chuckles on his departure. Mr. Behrens is a burly man who clearly has not seen the inside of a shower for quite some time. He brings a stench of strong body odor in with him. He settles into the chair after introductions, and I inquire about how he is adapting. How do you mean, ma'am? I see his rigidity, how braced he is, and I think, this can't happen twice in one day, followed closely by the thought, oh, please, I hope I have beer in my fridge at home. There are no strings, Mr. Behrens. I just wanted to know if you're okay. How have you been treated? And are you navigating in a way where you feel confident or safe? I feel guarded and vigilant. My words sound staccato to me. He begins to shake and I brace myself, unconsciously clenching my jaw. His shoulders rock and his lower lip trembles fiercely. I have both feet flat on the floor, ready to jump if needed. Suddenly, he bursts into tears. Dropping his face in his hands, I can see the veins pulsing and how red his skin is. Oh Christ, please don't let anyone see me like this. Please, he shudders and sobs uncontrollably. No one comes into this office without my asking, Mr. Behrens. You're in no danger. You have my word. I wait for him to spend it all before asking gently, do you mind if I ask what brought that on? He looks up with red-rimmed, brimming eyes, trying to compose himself, keeping his jaw set and his lips pursed. His gaze drops to the floor and he states haltingly, those words you spoke were the first kind thing anyone has said to me in 2 years. It broke me. I didn't expect that. I feel stunned and pause before I can continue, nearly as moved as the man sitting before me. Well, we're even then, I exhale. I didn't expect that. I raise an eyebrow with a smile and we share a light laugh before continuing. The remainder of the day, like most of them, pendulum swings between crises and poignancy. It is at once horrific and compelling, tender and harsh, spirit-filled and godless. I turn in my keys and radio for the night and walk to my truck. Dusk is falling already. The air is crisp and tree boughs wave in the wind, floating their fragrance across the air. In these pre-dawn and dusk spaces, I feel the heartbeat of something, ironies, humanity, a stripped down raw reality, finding its roots inside me. Fire camp indeed, I muse while clicking my key fob. I've been putting out fires all damn day. I'm fighting off a weepy feeling, too much trying to contain, reassure, instill hope. Too much squalor and despair. Light laughter ribbons up from the edge of the woods, and I see two men feeding an apple to the doe and the fawn. They are mesmerized, they don't even notice me. These men, they live on the delicate balance of opposite wings, needing to preserve the man who is someone's father or son, and needing to be the inmate who can instill enough fear to not be harmed. Seeing the imprisoned, feeding the free, jars my spirit in a way I can't name. But its very presence is why I will be back in the morning at an ungodly hour. And the last piece is Fireworks, which kind of focuses on my rather unconventional father. In 1964, my daddy declared that the 4th of July was being ruined by government rules and regulations. He liked his celebrations big. All the neighbors knew this, so our place is where everybody on the lake came to on festive occasions. They all knew my daddy had a different kind of outlook. He had a disdain for seatbelts, most cautions, various laws, and virgin drinks. He had what you'd call an affection for things that explode, lavishly embellished truth, unlocked doors, good scotch, and old dogs. We had a lot of things in our home stamped property of US Navy or property of American Telephone and Telegraph that Daddy had liberated. He explained to us that the bowls and ladders and flashlights and desks, etc., would otherwise sit languishing in some anonymous warehouse, practically taunting the very fabric of the American dream for a family to be free from want, like Mr. Roosevelt had said. So his acts of liberation were pretty much a demonstration of pure patriotism because he was almost single-handedly keeping the American dream alive, which is why he said the force should not be hindered in its revelry. Our house set up on a hill with the deck that was out back overlooking Mud Lake. Daddy built switchback stairs all the way down from the dock, clear down to the 20 by 50 patch of lawn that ran along the lake edge. We had a simple line dock going out about 20 feet and tied up our rowboat and canoe there. Bob and Lois Smead came early on the 4th to help set up. Bob and Daddy set about to create a fireworks show, arguing about launchers on the way to the garage, but agreeing that some nature of launcher would be just the thing to lift the fireworks high over the lake. Lois went off with Mama to set about making food with little flags stuck in. Daddy and Bob worked all afternoon in the hot garage, so they needed lots of beer to keep them going. When I brought the fresh round in, they were talking about the merits of gunpowder versus dynamite, but neither one knew the specifics of either. Daddy wondered aloud whether a small keg of gunpowder might act the same as a half stick of dynamite, and then they wouldn't have to worry. At the onset of dark, we must have had all of Interlochen Lane on our lawn. Daddy, being safety conscious after two men hurt their backs carrying a keg of beer down the switchback stairs, had installed a pulley system that went all the way from the top of our deck all the way down to the dock with a giant basket that could hold a keg of beer. Once my brother Dalton put Sissy Berman in the basket and he was going to launch her, but Mama put the kibosh on that. Neighbors brought their aluminum lawn chairs and banana chairs and picked good viewing spots. Bob Smead and Daddy put theirs at the end of the dock. There were lots of oohs and ahs as the sky lit up with colors, and clapping got louder as the evening wore into the night. Daddy had gone to the Indian nations to get the good stuff. Mama said that in another time he probably would have been a bootlegger. The O'Reilly twins and Cappy Bodine were running with sparklers in their hands. I wondered how they got away with it with their mamas there. But it being a holiday, and whenever the grown-ups have ice clinking in their glasses and laugh a lot, you get away with a lot more. The air was pungent with sulfur and lake water wafting up. Daddy yelled for everybody to get ready for the grand finale. He lit a fuse to something tied to the dock. Then he and Bob Smead ran to the lawn area and turned around to get a better look. The end of the dock, excuse me, there was a brilliant flash, and almost instantly a loud boom, immediately followed by flames. The end of the dock was mostly in the air in pieces, on fire. Parts of the rowboat came down in the lake, and the canoe was nowhere to be seen. The chairs that Daddy and Bob left on the dock were impaled into the side of the O'Reilly's boathouse. The guests were screaming and running, dodging falling debris. The Berman's wiener dog Luigi involuntarily defecated. Some guest knocked over the table with the food that had the little flag stuck in. Because the dock came loose from its mooring, the pulley's cable snapped and the keg hit the ground. While the grown-ups ran and screamed and covered their head with lawn chairs, my brother Dalton started serving the neighborhood kids beer. They grabbed their solo cup and run to a safe place to drink it. Bob Smead slipped in Luigi's defecation and landed hard on his backside, saying a mess of dirty words even after he ate. Daddy was the only one not moving. Bits of ash and debris and some burning dock boards were around him on the ground. He had his fingers on his chin and the other on his hip. "We must have miscalculated," he muttered. "We're going to have to make adjustments next year." Despite all the screaming and fuss, people often recollected that day with great fondness. It was even brought up at his funeral years later, provoking all manner of laughs and smiles. Though he wasn't much given towards regulations, it wasn't ever out of any kind of defiant nature, so much as his zeal for living was just so brimful, it burst the seams of most rules that came his way. His life, and by extension mine, was seldom dull. I was the only child in kindergarten who had an intimate knowledge of both dynamite and fire retardant clothing. That was claim to fame enough for me. And thank you. Switch off to the computer. Thanks.
Okay.